I have 47 recordings on my phone, 47 conversations between my mother-in-law, Eleanor, and my dying husband, Michael, captured over the 3 weeks she lived in our house, while cancer stole him from me. In those recordings, you can hear her coaching him, manipulating him, waiting until the morphine made him confused, then sliding documents in front of him and guiding his hand. "Just sign here, sweetheart. It's what you want. Catherine will understand." He didn't know what he was signing. He thought he was signing birthday cards, insurance forms, things that didn't matter. He trusted his mother, and she used that trust to steal his legacy. But she forgot one thing. I was listening, and I was recording, and I'm a court stenographer. We keep very, very good records. My name is Catherine Aldridge. I'm 67 years old, and for 30 years I worked in the Connecticut Superior Court, documenting testimony in cases worth millions of dollars. I've transcribed confessions, depositions, expert witness examinations. I've watched lawyers build cases word by word, evidence by evidence. I know what holds up in court and what falls apart, and I know how to listen. Eleanor never understood that about me. To her, I was just the working-class Irish girl from South Boston who'd gotten her hooks into her precious son. For 36 years, she looked at me like something unpleasant stuck to the bottom of her shoe, and for 36 years, I smiled and endured it because I loved Michael, and Michael loved his mother despite everything, but love doesn't make you blind. It just makes you patient. I met Michael Aldridge in the summer of 1988. I was 29, working as a legal secretary in Boston while I finished my court reporting certification. He was 32, a junior executive at his family's investment firm in town for a conference. We met at a bar in Back Bay, me with my girlfriends, him trying to escape a boring dinner with clients. He asked if he could buy me a drink. I said only if he could handle a woman who talked faster than he could think. He laughed. God, I loved his laugh. We were married 6 months later, in a ceremony his mother refused to attend. Too sudden, she told everyone. He barely knows her. What she meant was, she's not one of us, not Greenwich money, not Connecticut aristocracy. Just a Murphy from Southie with a fast mouth and no pedigree. Michael stood up to her that day, told her if she couldn't accept me, she couldn't be part of our life. Eleanor came to the wedding. She wore black. That set the tone for the next 36 years. I could fill a book with Eleanor's cruelties, the accidental exclusions from family photographs, the Christmas gifts that were always slightly wrong, a size too small, a color I'd mentioned hating. The way she'd ask about my family, and then wince delicately, as if my working-class relatives caused her physical pain. But the worst was how she talked about me to Michael, always when she thought I couldn't hear, always with that tone of gentle concern that was really poison wrapped in silk. "I just worry about you, sweetheart." She comes from such a different background. People like that, they don't understand our world. Has she put on weight? I only mention it because I want her to be healthy. I saw her talking to that waiter rather familiarly. I'm sure it was nothing. Drip, drip, drip. 36 years of it, wearing away at my marriage like water on stone. Michael always defended me. Always. But I could see the doubt creeping in sometimes, the way he'd look at me after a visit with his mother, trying to reconcile the woman he loved with the portrait Eleanor kept painting. It exhausted him. It exhausted both of us. But we survived it. We had 2 children, Jennifer and Robert, and we built a life together in Essex, far enough from Greenwich that Eleanor couldn't drop by unannounced. Michael eventually took over the family firm, and made it more successful than his father ever had. I built my career, became one of the most requested court stenographers in the state. We were happy. And then, in September of 2024, Michael was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. Inoperable. The doctors gave him 3 months, maybe 4 if we were lucky. I won't describe what those first days were like. If you've ever gotten that kind of news, If you haven't, words can't capture it. The world just stops. And then it starts again, but everything is different. Every moment is borrowed time. Every conversation might be the last. Michael wanted to die at home. We set up a hospital bed in the sunroom, the one with the big windows overlooking the garden he loved. Hospice nurses came every day. Our children flew in from Boston and New York. We prepared for the end as best we could. And then Eleanor arrived. She showed up on a Tuesday afternoon, 2 weeks after the diagnosis, with 2 Louis Vuitton suitcases and an expression of determined martyrdom. "I'm here to help," she announced, sweeping into our house like she owned it. "You can't possibly manage this alone, Catherine. You don't have the experience." I wanted to throw her out. God, I wanted to. But Michael's face lit up when he saw her. That desperate hope of a dying man who wants his mother near. And I couldn't take that away from him. Not when he had so little time left. "Of course, Eleanor," I said. "The guest room is ready." She smiled at me. That smile. 36 years, and I still couldn't read whether she was pleased or plotting. As it turned out, she was plotting. Now, I watched Eleanor move into my home with 36 years of suspicion honed to a razor's edge, and I was right to be suspicious. But here's the thing about being married to a forensic accountant. Wait, no. Here's the thing about being a court stenographer. You learn to document everything. You learn to keep records that will hold up under scrutiny. And you learn that the truth, properly preserved, is more powerful than any lie. Subscribe to Echo Lens Stories if you haven't already, because what I discovered over the next 3 weeks would test everything I thought I knew about my mother-in-law and about myself. The first sign something was wrong came on Eleanor's 3rd night in our house. I woke at 3 a.m. to use the bathroom and heard voices from the sunroom. Soft voices, whispering. I crept down the hallway and stood just outside the door, my heart pounding. "Just sign here, sweetheart. It's just paperwork. Catherine doesn't need to know." Eleanor's voice, sweet as honey, gentle as a snake. And Michael's voice, thick with morphine. What is this?" "Nothing important. Just some documents for the family. You trust me, don't you?" "Of course, Mother. I can't see the words." "That's all right. I'll guide your hand. Just here. That's it. Good boy." I stood in that hallway, frozen, listening to my mother-in-law manipulate my dying husband into signing something he couldn't even see. And I knew, with the bone-deep certainty of 30 years of courtroom experience, that I was listening to a crime in progress. I didn't confront her that night. Every instinct screamed at me to burst into that room, to tear those documents from Eleanor's manicured hands, to demand to know what she was doing to my husband. But 30 years of courtroom experience had taught me something more valuable than righteous anger. Evidence wins cases. Emotions lose them, so I stood in that dark hallway, hands trembling, and I did what I do best. I observed. I memorized. And when Eleanor finally emerged from the sunroom, documents tucked under her arm, satisfaction softening her usually sharp features, I pressed myself into the shadows and let her pass. She didn't see me. She never really saw me. The next morning, I began building my case. The first thing I did was check on Michael's existing will. We'd had it drawn up 15 years ago with Diana Blackwell, the Aldridge family attorney. It was straightforward. Everything split between our children Jennifer and Robert, with me retaining a life estate in the house and full access to our joint accounts. Michael had wanted to leave me more, but I'd insisted. Our children should have their inheritance. I had my career, my savings, my pension. I didn't need his family's money, but I knew where that will was kept, in Michael's study, in the locked drawer of his desk. The morning after I heard Eleanor's whispers, I checked. The drawer was empty. I searched the entire study, trying to keep my hands from shaking. Nothing. The original will, the copies, even the folder they'd been stored in, all gone. Eleanor had been thorough. I had to give her that. But here's the thing she didn't know. I'd made my own copy 5 years ago, after Eleanor's husband died, and I saw how she'd manipulated his estate to cut out the grandchildren she didn't like. I'd watched her work, then seen the techniques she used, and I'd thought, what if she tries this with Michael? So I'd taken the will to our bank, made a certified copy, and locked it in a safe deposit box that Eleanor didn't know existed. The key was on my key ring, disguised as an old house key. I'd told no one, not even Michael. Paranoid? Maybe. But paranoia is just pattern recognition when you're dealing with someone like Eleanor. The original was gone, but I had a certified copy in a vault. Step 1, complete. Step 2 was harder. I needed to document what Eleanor was doing, not just suspect it, but prove it. That meant recordings. That meant evidence that would hold up in court if this ever went to trial. Connecticut is a 2-party consent state for recordings. You need permission from everyone being recorded for it to be admissible. But there are exceptions. If you're recording to document a crime, fraud, elder abuse, exploitation of a vulnerable adult, the rules shift. And what Eleanor was doing to Michael absolutely qualified. I started that night. I downloaded a recording app on my phone, tested it to make sure the audio was clear, and waited. At 2:47 a.m., I heard Eleanor's door open. I heard her footsteps on the stairs. And I crept down the hallway after her, phone in hand, recording light glowing red in the darkness. Michael, sweetheart, wake up. Mama's here. Mother? What time? Shh, don't worry about that. I just need you to look at something for me. Can you do that? Can you look at this paper? I'm so tired. I know, baby. I know. But this is important. This is for the family. You want to take care of the family, don't you? Always wanted to. Of course you did. That's my good boy. Now just sign here, right at the bottom. I'll help you. Just like when you were little and I helped you with your homework. I listened to my husband's confused, drugged murmurs. I listened to Eleanor's honeyed manipulation. And I recorded every word. Over the next 3 weeks, I captured 47 conversations. Some were brief, just Eleanor checking what Michael remembered, testing how confused the morphine had made him. Others were longer, more elaborate, full of leading questions and carefully planted suggestions. You know, Catherine never really understood our family, don't you, sweetheart? Catherine loves me. Of course she does, in her way. But she doesn't understand what the Aldridge name means. She'd probably just give everything to charity. Some cause she read about in a magazine. She's not like that. I'm sure you're right. But just in case, wouldn't it be better if the family money stayed in the family? If Mother took care of things the way I always have? I can't think. You don't have to think, sweetheart. That's why I'm here. Just sign this, and I'll handle everything. I always handle everything, don't I? The worst recording was from the night before Michael died. He was barely conscious by then, the cancer and the morphine combining to pull him somewhere far away. But Eleanor was still there, still whispering, still trying to extract one more signature. Michael, can you hear me? I need you to sign one more thing. It's the last one, I promise. No more. Tired. I know, baby. But this is important. This is for Mother. You want to help Mother, don't you? Love you, Mother. I love you too, sweetheart. Now just move your hand. Just a little. That's it. That's my good boy. I stood outside that door, tears streaming down my face, and listened to my mother-in-law forge my dying husband's signature while he was too weak to hold a pen. And I recorded every second of it. My friend Grace was my witness. She'd been helping with Michael's care. She's a retired nurse, and she'd offered to supplement the hospice visits with her own expertise. I trusted her completely. Eleanor's doing something, I told her on the 4th day, showing her the recordings. I don't know exactly what yet, but it's not good. Grace listened to 3 recordings, her face growing darker with each one. That's elder abuse, Catherine. That's exploitation of a vulnerable adult. You need to report this. Not yet. I need more evidence. I need to know exactly what documents she's having him sign. How are you going to find that out? I smiled grimly. I'm going to search her room. It took me a week to find the right opportunity. Eleanor guarded her privacy fiercely, rarely leaving the house except for brief errands. But on the 12th day of her stay, she announced she needed to visit her own attorney in Greenwich. Family business, she said airily. Nothing that concerns you, Catherine. The moment her car pulled out of the driveway, I was in her room. She'd hidden the documents in a zippered compartment of her largest suitcase. I found a new will, typed on official letterhead, with what was supposed to be Michael's signature at the bottom. I found power of attorney documents, medical directives, a trust revision, all of it designed to transfer control of everything to Eleanor. And at the very bottom of the stack, I found our original will, the real one, crumpled and marked with a large red X. She hadn't destroyed it yet. She was waiting until the new documents were finalized, probably planning to burn it the day Michael died. I photographed everything, every page, every signature, every date. I put it all back exactly as I'd found it. Then I went to the sunroom, sat beside my sleeping husband, and held his hand. I've got her, I whispered. She doesn't know it yet, but I've got her. Michael's eyes fluttered open for just a moment. He looked at me, really looked at me the way he had when we first met, and squeezed my hand. My Catherine, he murmured. Always. Fighting for us. Always, I promised. Until the very end. He died 3 days later. Michael passed on a Sunday morning, just as the sun was coming up. I was holding his hand when it happened. So was Jennifer, who'd been keeping vigil with me all night. Robert had stepped out to get coffee. He never forgave himself for that, though I've told him 1,000 times there's nothing to forgive. Eleanor wasn't there. She'd gone to bed at midnight, complaining of exhaustion. Wake me if anything changes, she'd said, and I'd nodded, knowing I wouldn't. If my husband was going to die, he was going to die with people who truly loved him by his side, not with the woman who'd spent his final weeks robbing him. The hospice nurse checked his vitals one last time and shook her head gently. He's gone. I'm so sorry. Jennifer collapsed against me, sobbing. I held her and stared at Michael's face. Peaceful now, the pain finally gone. and felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Not relief that he was dead. God, no. The grief hit me later, in waves so powerful I thought they might drown me. But in that moment, what I felt was relief that his suffering was over. Relief that Eleanor couldn't hurt him anymore. Relief that the battle I'd been fighting in secret for 3 weeks was almost done. I had the evidence. I had the recordings. I had photographs of every fraudulent document Eleanor had hidden in her suitcase. Now I just had to wait for her to make her move. I didn't have to wait long. Eleanor descended the stairs an hour after Michael's death, already dressed in black, her face arranged in an expression of artful grief. She stopped in the sunroom doorway and let out a theatrical gasp. "Oh, my baby, my beautiful boy." She rushed to the bed, pushing Jennifer aside, draping herself over Michael's body like a woman in a Victorian painting. The performance was flawless. The sobs, the whispered endearments, the way she clutched at his hands she'd guided across documents he couldn't read, signing away his legacy to the mother who'd never really loved anyone but herself. I watched her perform and felt nothing but cold, calm certainty. You have no idea what's coming, I thought. But you'll find out soon enough. The funeral was 3 days later. Eleanor wore red, not black, not navy, not even dark purple, bright, arterial red. "Michael always loved me in this color," she announced to the gathering mourners, loud enough for me to hear from across the room. He said it reminded him of roses, his favorite flower. Michael's favorite flower was the lily. We had them planted all around our house. I said nothing. I shook hands, accepted condolences, watched Eleanor hold court like she was the widow instead of me. Jennifer stood beside me, vibrating with barely suppressed fury. "How can she do this?" my daughter hissed. "At Dad's funeral?" "Let her," I murmured. "Let her think she's won." "Mom, what are you—" "Not now, sweetheart. Trust me. Just a few more days." The will reading was scheduled for the following Thursday. In the days between the funeral and the reading, Eleanor was busy. I could see it in the way she moved through our house, my house, with increasing confidence. She was already measuring the rooms, I realized, already planning what she would change when everything was hers. She made phone calls behind closed doors. She met twice with her attorney, Gerald Morton. She was solicitous and sweet to Robert, who'd always been easier to manipulate than his sister, and coolly dismissive of Jennifer, who'd inherited my suspicious nature. "Your grandmother seems awfully cheerful for someone who just lost her son," Jennifer observed on the night before the reading. "She thinks she's about to inherit everything." Jennifer stared at me. "Mom, what are you talking about? The will leaves everything to us. I've seen it. You showed me years ago. That was the original will. Eleanor had Michael sign a new one." "She what?" I took my daughter's hands. "Jennifer, I need you to trust me. I know what I'm doing. I have evidence, recordings, photographs, everything we need. But I need you to stay calm at the reading tomorrow. No matter what Eleanor says, no matter what documents she produces, I need you to let me handle it." "Recordings? Mom, how long have you known about this?" "Since her 3rd night in the house. I heard her whispering to your father at 3 a.m., getting him to sign things he couldn't even see." Jennifer's face went white, then red. "And you didn't do anything? You just let her—" "I built a case." My voice was steady, even though my hands were trembling. "That's what I do, Jennifer. I spent 30 years in courtrooms watching attorneys win and lose. The ones who win are the ones who wait, who gather evidence, who let their opponents hang themselves before moving in for the kill. Jesus, Mom. Your father would have wanted me to protect his legacy, protect you and Robert, and that's exactly what I've done. Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. Then she squeezed my hands back. Okay, I trust you. But I want to be there when you destroy her. You will be, I promise. The morning of the will reading, I dressed carefully. My best black suit, the one Michael had always said made me look like a senator. My mother's pearls. Eleanor had always sneered at them as costume jewelry, but they were real, bought with my father's first steady paycheck. My wedding ring. I put the manila envelope in my briefcase. Inside were copies of everything. The recordings on a flash drive, the photographs of Eleanor's hidden documents, my certified copy of the original will, and a detailed timeline of Eleanor's manipulation written in the precise language I'd used in thousands of court documents. 36 years of enduring Eleanor's cruelty. 3 weeks of documenting her crimes. One satisfying ending. I looked at myself in the mirror and smiled. Time to finish this. Diana Blackwell's office was on the second floor of a dignified brick building in downtown Essex. I'd been there before, for the original will signing, for updates over the years. Diana had always been kind to me, even when Eleanor made cutting remarks about my modest background. Today, though, Eleanor had brought her own attorney, Gerald Morton, a silver-haired man in a too-expensive suit who radiated smug confidence. They arrived together, Eleanor sweeping into the waiting room like she owned it, barely glancing at me. "Shall we begin?" she said. "I'd like to get this unpleasantness over with." Unpleasantness. That's what she called the distribution of her son's estate. Her son, whom she'd manipulated in his dying days. Her son, whose signature she'd forged while he was too drugged to resist. "Yes," I said, rising from my chair. "Let's begin." And I followed them into the conference room with my briefcase full of evidence, ready to watch Eleanor's world collapse. The conference room smelled of old leather and expensive coffee. Diana Blackwell sat at the head of the table, her face carefully neutral. She'd been the Aldridge family attorney for 40 years, long enough to know exactly what Eleanor was capable of, even if she'd never been able to prove it. Eleanor took the seat to Diana's right, Gerald Morton beside her. I sat across from them with Jennifer on one side and Robert on the other. My son looked uncomfortable, confused by the tension crackling through the room. Jennifer looked like she was ready to launch herself across the table. "Before we begin," Eleanor said, folding her hands on the polished mahogany, "I want to say how difficult this is for all of us. Michael was—" She paused for effect, dabbing at dry eyes. "Michael was my heart, my firstborn, my golden boy." "Eleanor," Diana said gently, "perhaps we should just proceed with the reading." "Of course. I'm sorry. It's just so hard." Diana opened the folder in front of her. I could see multiple documents inside. More than there should have been for a simple will reading. My pulse quickened. "I have here the last will and testament of Michael David Aldridge," Diana began. "However, I should note that I've received additional documentation. Mr. Morton has provided what he claims is a more recent version of Michael's will, executed 3 weeks before his death." Jennifer's hand found mine under the table and squeezed hard. "If there are competing claims," Diana continued, her voice carefully even, "we'll need to review both documents and potentially involve the probate court. There's no competition." Eleanor's smile was triumphant. My son changed his mind in his final weeks. He realized that Catherine, She glanced at me with barely concealed contempt. Wasn't equipped to handle the Aldridge estate. He wanted his mother to manage things, to protect the family legacy. Gerald Morton slid a document across the table to Diana. This will was executed on November 28th, properly witnessed and notarized. It supersedes any previous testamentary documents. Diana studied the will, her frown deepening. I watched her eyes move across the page, taking in the signatures, the dates, the language that would strip everything from me and my children. This does appear to be in order, Diana said slowly. The signatures match Michael's. Of course they do. Eleanor's voice dripped with satisfaction. My son knew what he wanted. He told me himself, night after night, how worried he was about leaving everything to someone who didn't understand our family's values. Is that what he said? I asked quietly. Everyone turned to look at me. I'd barely spoken since entering the room. I beg your pardon? Eleanor's eyes narrowed. I asked if that's what Michael said, that he was worried about leaving things to me, that he wanted you to have everything. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the manila envelope. Because I have 47 recordings that suggest otherwise. The color drained from Eleanor's face. What are you talking about? Gerald Morton demanded. What recordings? I placed the envelope on the table, but didn't open it. For the past 3 weeks, from the day Eleanor moved into our home until the night before Michael died, I recorded every conversation she had with my husband, every midnight visit, every whispered manipulation. Every time she guided his hand across documents he couldn't see, because the morphine had him so confused he thought he was signing birthday cards. That's absurd. Eleanor's voice was steady, but I could see her hands trembling. I never... Recording number 17, November 19th, 3:47 a.m. I pulled out my phone and pressed play. Eleanor's voice filled the room, honey-sweet and deadly. Just sign here, sweetheart. It's what you want. Catherine will understand. And Michael's voice, thick with drugs. What is this? Nothing important, just some documents for the family. You trust me, don't you? Of course, Mother. I can't see the words. That's all right. I'll guide your hand. Just here. That's it. Good boy. I stopped the recording. The silence in the room was absolute. I have 46 more, I said. Each one documenting Eleanor manipulating a dying man who was too drugged to understand what he was signing. I also have photographs of the documents she hid in her suitcase, including the original will, which she marked with a red X and planned to destroy. I pulled the photographs from the envelope and spread them across the table. The forged will, the power of attorney, the trust revision, and there, at the bottom of the stack, the original will with Eleanor's red X slashed across it. That's our original will, Diana breathed. The one I prepared 15 years ago. The one that was supposed to be in Michael's desk. Eleanor took it. She was planning to destroy it after Michael died, when she was confident her forgeries would hold up. I pulled out the last document, my certified copy. But I made my own copy 5 years ago and locked it in a safe deposit box. I had a feeling Eleanor might try something, someday. I just didn't expect it to be this. Eleanor's composure finally cracked. You're lying. You fabricated those recordings. The recordings are time-stamped and embedded with location data, I said calmly. They were captured on a device registered to my name in a house that both of us occupied. Any forensic analyst can verify their authenticity. This is entrapment. You can't just record someone without their consent. Connecticut law allows recordings when documenting a crime. And what you did, Eleanor, manipulating a vulnerable adult, exploiting his diminished capacity, forging his signature on legal documents, that's elder abuse. That's fraud. That's criminal. Gerald Morton had gone very pale. Eleanor, I think we should... Shut up. Eleanor's mask had fallen completely. Her eyes blazed with fury as she stared at me across the table. You planned this. You sneaky, conniving little... I protected my husband. My voice didn't waver. I protected his legacy. I protected our children. That's what wives do, Eleanor. Not that you'd know anything about that. Mrs. Aldridge, Diana's voice cut through the tension. Given the evidence Mrs. Catherine Aldridge has presented, I cannot in good conscience proceed with the will Mr. Morton has provided. There are serious questions about Michael's capacity at the time of signing, and the recordings suggest the signatures may have been obtained through coercion or fraud. This is ridiculous. Eleanor slammed her palm on the table. I am his mother. I have rights. You have the right to remain silent. I pulled one final document from my briefcase. This is a formal complaint I'm filing with the Connecticut State Police. Elder abuse, fraud, forgery, exploitation of a vulnerable adult. I slid it across to Diana. I'd like you to witness my signature. Eleanor stared at the complaint like it was a snake about to strike. You wouldn't dare. Wouldn't I? I picked up a pen. You've underestimated me for 36 years, Eleanor. You called me trash from South Boston. You told Michael he should have married Deborah Hartwell. You tried to poison my marriage, alienate my children, and steal everything my husband and I built together. I signed the complaint with a flourish. But here's what you never understood. I'm not trash. I'm a court stenographer. I've spent 30 years watching guilty people try to escape justice. And I've learned exactly how to make sure they don't. I handed the signed complaint back to Diana. I want her prosecuted. Every charge that applies. And I want it on the record that Eleanor Aldridge attempted to defraud her dying son's estate while he was too incapacitated to resist. Eleanor turned to Gerald Morton, desperation replacing fury. Do something. You're my lawyer. Morton was already gathering his papers. Mrs. Aldridge, given the circumstances, I don't think I can continue to represent you. The evidence of fraud is substantial. If I proceed, I could be charged as an accessory. You coward. You spineless. Eleanor, Diana's voice was ice. I think you should leave, now, before Catherine decides to add harassment to her complaint. Eleanor stood slowly. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked old, defeated. The carefully constructed facade of aristocratic grace had crumbled, revealing the desperate, grasping woman underneath. She looked at me with pure hatred. This isn't over, she hissed. Yes, Eleanor, I met her gaze without flinching. It is. Eleanor swept out of the conference room with what dignity she could muster, Gerald Morton scurrying behind her like a rat abandoning a sinking ship. The door slammed behind them, and then it was just me, my children, and Diana Blackwell, sitting in the aftermath of 36 years of war. Jennifer exhaled shakily. Mom, that was... I don't even have words. Neither do I. Robert was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. Mom, you recorded her for 3 weeks while Dad was dying? I documented a crime. That's what I was trained to do. I gathered my papers back into the envelope with hands that had finally started to tremble. The adrenaline was fading. I'm sorry I didn't tell you both beforehand. I couldn't risk Eleanor finding out. Finding out what? That you were building a case against her while Dad, Robert's voice cracked. He was dying, Mom. Our father was dying, and you were playing detective. I was protecting him. The words came out sharper than I intended. I was making sure his last wishes were honored, that everything he worked for went to you and Jennifer the way he wanted, not to a woman who spent her whole life manipulating him. But the recordings, listening to her, manipulate him night after night, that must have been hell. I looked at my son, my gentle, trusting son who'd inherited his father's soft heart. It was absolute hell, Robert. Every night, I listened to that woman poison your father's mind while he was too sick to fight back. Every night, I wanted to burst in there and throw her out. But if I'd done that, she would have destroyed the evidence. She would have hired lawyers. It would have been her word against mine, and Eleanor has spent 60 years perfecting her word. So you waited. I waited. I documented. I built an airtight case that she couldn't wriggle out of. I reached across the table and took his hand. I'm sorry if that seems cold. I'm sorry if you think I should have handled it differently. But I did what I had to do to protect our family. Your father would have understood. Robert was quiet for a long moment. Then he squeezed my hand. He would have, he admitted. Dad always said you were the toughest person he knew. I guess I just never understood what that meant. Diana Blackwell cleared her throat. If we could proceed with the actual will reading, the legitimate one. I nodded. Please. The reading was straightforward, exactly as Michael and I had planned 15 years ago. The house and primary assets to me, with provisions for our children. Trust funds for Jennifer and Robert. Charitable bequests to organizations we'd supported over the years. Nothing surprising. Nothing contested. With the fraudulent will invalidated, Diana concluded, this document stands as Michael's final testament. The estate will proceed through probate in the normal manner. I'll handle the filings personally. Thank you, Diana. Catherine. The older woman set down her pen and looked at me with something like admiration. In 40 years of practicing estate law, I've seen a lot of family conflicts. I've seen people do terrible things to each other over money. But I've never seen anyone handle it the way you did, with such precision. I had a good teacher, I smiled faintly. 30 years of watching attorneys in action. You learn what works. Well, it worked. Eleanor doesn't have a leg to stand on. Between the recordings, the photographs, and her lawyer's hasty retreat, I doubt she'll even try to contest. Jennifer leaned forward. What about the criminal charges? Is she actually going to be prosecuted? That's up to the state's attorney, but given the evidence, I'd say it's likely. At minimum, she's looking at an investigation. At maximum? Diana shrugged. Fraud, elder abuse, forgery. These are serious charges. At her age, even a short sentence would be significant. I thought about that. Eleanor in a courtroom, facing a judge, the social standing she'd spent her whole life building crumbling around her. Part of me wanted that. Wanted her to feel even a fraction of the helplessness she'd made Michael feel in his final days. But another part of me was just tired. I'll let the process unfold, I said. Whatever the state's attorney decides, I'll support. But I'm not going to make it my mission to destroy Eleanor. I just wanted to protect what's mine. Diana nodded. That's probably wise. Vendetta cases can drag on for years. Better to let the system handle it. We finished the paperwork within the hour. I signed where I needed to sign, initialed where I needed to initial, and by noon I was the legal executor of Michael's estate. Everything he'd built, everything we'd built together, was protected. But as I walked out of Diana's office into the cold January sunshine, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollowed out, empty. Michael was still dead. Eleanor's defeat didn't change that. All those recordings, all that evidence, all that careful planning, none of it could bring my husband back. Jennifer appeared beside me, linking her arm through mine. "Mom, you okay?" "I will be." I watched a cardinal land on a nearby branch, its red feathers bright against the gray winter sky. It's just, I spent 3 weeks focused on the fight. Now the fight's over, and I don't know what to do next. "Grieve," Jennifer said softly. "You haven't let yourself grieve yet. Not really." She was right. I'd been so focused on Eleanor, on protecting Michael's legacy, on building the case, on preparing for this confrontation, that I'd never let myself feel the full weight of losing him. Robert joined us on the sidewalk. He still looked shaken, but something had shifted in his expression. Understanding, maybe, or acceptance. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we go home, we have lunch, we start figuring out the estate." I took a deep breath, and somewhere in there, I fall apart, probably more than once. "We'll be there," Jennifer said, "both of us. Whatever you need." "I know." I pulled my children close, holding them the way I'd held them when they were small. That's the one thing your grandmother never understood. She thought family was about control, about power, about making sure you got what you deserved. It's not? No, I thought about Michael, his kindness, his patience, the way he'd loved me even when his mother tried to tear us apart. Family is about showing up, about protecting each other, about doing what's hard because it's right, not because it's easy. I released them and straightened my shoulders. "Let's go home." We were halfway to the parking lot when my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You think you've won. You haven't. This family has resources you can't imagine. Enjoy your victory while it lasts. E." I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I laughed. I showed the text to Jennifer, who read it with narrowed eyes. "She's threatening you? After everything that just happened? Eleanor doesn't know how to stop. She's been controlling this family for so long, she can't imagine a world where she doesn't get what she wants." Should we call the police? I considered it. A threatening text, coming so soon after the will reading, could certainly be added to the complaint I'd filed. It showed consciousness of guilt, lack of remorse, a pattern of intimidation. But I was tired, so bone-deep tired. "Not yet," I said. "Let's see what she actually does. Eleanor's bark has always been worse than her bite." I was wrong about that, but I didn't know it yet. The first sign of trouble came 2 days later. I was at home, finally allowing myself to sit with the grief I'd been suppressing for weeks. Jennifer had flown back to Boston. She had cases waiting. But Robert had stayed, claiming he wanted to help with the house. I think he was worried about leaving me alone. The doorbell rang at 9 a.m. I opened it to find 2 men in suits standing on my porch. "Mrs. Catherine Aldridge?" "Yes." "I'm Detective Morrison. This is Detective Chen, Connecticut State Police." The taller one showed me his badge. "We'd like to ask you some questions about the death of Michael Aldridge." My stomach dropped. "The death? What about it?" "We've received a complaint alleging that Michael Aldridge's death may not have been from natural causes. The complainant suggests that his medications may have been tampered with." I stared at them. "Tampered with? By whom?" Detective Morrison's expression was carefully neutral. "The complaint names you, Mrs. Aldridge. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then I understood. Eleanor. Of course. If she couldn't beat me in probate court, she'd try to destroy me another way. Accuse me of murder. Turn the investigation away from her crimes and toward a fiction she'd created. That's absurd, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. My husband died of pancreatic cancer, stage 4. He was under hospice care for weeks. There were nurses in this house every day. We understand that, ma'am, but we're obligated to follow up on all complaints. Would you mind answering some questions? I wanted to slam the door in their faces. Wanted to scream that Eleanor was the criminal, not me. But 30 years of courtroom experience had taught me something important. Innocent people who refuse to cooperate look guilty. Come in, I said. I have nothing to hide. The interview lasted 2 hours. They asked about Michael's medications, about who had access to them, about my relationship with my husband, our marriage, any conflicts we'd had. They asked about the will, about Eleanor's accusations, about the recordings I'd made. I answered everything calmly, completely, the way I'd watched witnesses answer questions for 3 decades. I offered to provide the hospice records, the medical files, the names of every nurse and doctor who'd treated Michael. I showed them the recordings of Eleanor, proof that she, not I, had been manipulating Michael in his final days. By the end, I could see the skepticism in their eyes shifting. They'd come expecting to investigate a potential murderer. They were leaving with serious questions about the woman who'd filed the complaint. We'll be in touch, Mrs. Aldridge, Detective Morrison said as they left, and we'll be looking into the other allegations as well, the ones against Eleanor Aldridge. Thank you. But after they were gone, I sank into Michael's chair and shook. She'd tried to have me arrested for murdering the husband I'd loved for 36 years. The husband I'd spent his final weeks protecting from her. The depth of Eleanor's hatred took my breath away. Robert found me there an hour later, still sitting in the dark living room. Mom? What happened? There were police cars outside. I told him everything. His face went from confused to horrified to furious in the space of 5 minutes. She accused you of killing Dad? Her own son? She'll do anything to win, Robert. I've known that for 36 years. I just didn't realize how far she'd go. This is insane. We need to, get a lawyer, file a countersuit, something. We need to wait. I took his hand. The police are investigating her now, not me. I gave them everything. The recordings, the photos, the whole story. They know Eleanor is the one who committed crimes, not me. But what if they don't believe you? What if she has connections, people who can make this go her way? Then we fight. I squeezed his hand. But I don't think it'll come to that. Eleanor overplayed her hand. She's desperate now, and desperate people make mistakes. I was right about that part. 3 days later, I got a call from Detective Morrison. Mrs. Aldridge, I wanted to update you on our investigation. We've reviewed the hospice records, spoken with the medical staff, and examined the evidence you provided. There's no indication that your husband's death was anything other than natural. Thank you for letting me know. There's more. Based on the recordings and documents you shared, we've opened a formal investigation into Eleanor Aldridge. The state's attorney is reviewing the case for potential charges. I wanted you to know that your complaint is being taken very seriously. And her complaint against me? Dismissed. The evidence doesn't support her allegations. Frankly, Mrs. Aldridge, it looks like a deliberate attempt to obstruct justice and intimidate a witness. A pause. If you wanted to add filing a false police report to your complaint against her, you'd have grounds. I thought about it. Another charge. Another layer of consequence for Eleanor to face. Yes, I said. Add it. We'll be in touch about next steps. And Mrs. Aldridge? I've been a detective for 20 years. I've seen a lot of family disputes turn ugly. But the case you built against your mother-in-law is one of the most thorough I've ever encountered. You should have been a prosecutor. I just paid attention, I said. That's all. After I hung up, I sat in the sunroom, the room where Michael had died, where Eleanor had whispered her manipulations, where I'd recorded the evidence that would bring her down, and watched the sun set over the garden. The cardinal was back, sitting on the branch outside the window, its red feathers glowing in the fading light. I did it, Michael, I whispered. I protected everything, just like I promised. The bird tilted its head, almost like it was listening. Then it flew away into the darkening sky. 2 weeks later, Eleanor Aldridge was arrested. The charges: fraud, forgery, elder abuse, exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and filing a false police report. She was released on bail. Her remaining assets were substantial enough for that. But the damage was done. Her name was in the papers. Her face was on the evening news. The social circle she'd spent 60 years cultivating watched her downfall with the same polite horror they'd once reserved for other people's scandals. I didn't watch the arrest. Didn't need to. I'd already won the only victory that mattered. Michael's legacy was safe. Our children were protected. And Eleanor finally was facing consequences. That was enough. The trial took place 8 months later. I attended every day, sitting in the gallery with Jennifer on one side and Robert on the other. We watched. Eleanor's lawyers try to spin her actions as a grieving mother's confusion. We watched the prosecution play my recordings, one by one, each one more damning than the last. We watched the jury's faces shift from skepticism to horror as they heard Eleanor coaching her dying son to sign away his legacy. The verdict came on a Thursday afternoon. Guilty on all counts. Eleanor stood perfectly still as the judge read the decision. She was 89 years old, dressed in the kind of understated elegance she'd always favored, her white hair immaculately styled. From a distance, she looked like someone's gracious grandmother. Only those of us who knew her could see the fury burning behind her eyes. The sentencing hearing was 2 weeks later. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s who'd clearly seen through Eleanor's aristocratic facade, was not inclined toward mercy. Mrs. Aldridge, your crimes represent a particularly egregious betrayal of trust. You exploited your own son during the most vulnerable period of his life. You manipulated him into signing documents he couldn't understand. You attempted to steal from his wife and children. And when your scheme was uncovered, you tried to have that wife arrested for murder, a charge you knew to be false. Eleanor's lawyer started to speak, but the judge silenced him with a look. The court has considered your age and your lack of prior criminal record. However, we have also considered the calculated nature of your crimes, your complete lack of remorse, and your attempts to obstruct justice. Therefore, I am sentencing you to 3 years in state prison, followed by 5 years of probation. 3 years at 89. Eleanor's face went white. For the first time in 60 years of knowing her, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Your Honor, her lawyer sputtered, given my client's age, a prison sentence is essentially a death sentence. Then perhaps your client should have considered that before she embarked on her scheme. The judge banged her gavel. Court is adjourned. I watched them lead Eleanor away. She turned at the door, searching the gallery until her eyes found mine. I expected hatred, fury, the same burning resentment she'd carried for 36 years. Instead, I saw something I'd never seen from Eleanor Aldridge: defeat. She looked away first. We didn't celebrate. It didn't feel right to celebrate sending an 89-year-old woman to prison, even one who'd spent her life causing harm. Instead, Jennifer and Robert and I went to dinner at a quiet restaurant near the courthouse. We ordered Michael's favorite wine and raised our glasses. "To Dad," Robert said, "who deserved better than he got." "To Dad," Jennifer echoed, "and to Mom, who protected him until the end." I touched my glass to theirs but didn't drink. My throat was too tight. I didn't want it to end like this, I admitted. I just wanted to protect what was ours. I never wanted Eleanor in prison. "She put herself there," Jennifer said firmly. "Every choice she made led to this moment. You just documented it." "Your sister's right." Robert reached across the table to take my hand. "Eleanor could have accepted that Dad loved you, could have been a real grandmother to us instead of a manipulator, could have respected his wishes when he was dying. She chose not to. Over and over again, she chose cruelty over kindness." "Consequences aren't cruelty," Jennifer added. "They're just consequences." I knew they were right. Intellectually, I knew it. But sitting in that restaurant, thinking about Eleanor being processed into a prison system at 89 years old, I couldn't feel victorious. I just felt sad. Sad for the family we could have been if Eleanor had been different. Sad for Michael, who'd spent his whole life caught between the mother who controlled him and the wife who loved him. Sad for myself, maybe. For the 36 years I'd spent fighting a war I'd never wanted. Eleanor served 14 months before her health declined enough to qualify for compassionate release. She spent her remaining days in a nursing facility, alone, except for Vivian, who remained loyal until the end. Thomas never visited, neither did I. She died 2 years after the trial, on a rainy Tuesday morning in November. I found out from Diana Blackwell, who called to inform me that I was mentioned in Eleanor's final will, not as a beneficiary, but as someone specifically excluded. Even in death, Eleanor couldn't let go of her hatred. "She left a letter for you," Diana said. "Do you want me to read it?" I almost said no. What could Eleanor possibly say that I'd want to hear? But curiosity won out. "Go ahead." Diana cleared her throat. "Catherine, you think you won. You didn't. I never respected you, never accepted you, never believed you were worthy of my son. Everything I did because Michael deserved better than a working-class girl from South Boston who got her hooks into him before he knew any better. If I had succeeded, I would have protected the Aldridge legacy from someone who could never understand it. I failed. But I was right. And I hope that knowledge haunts you for the rest of your miserable life." "Eleanor," I laughed. "Mrs. Aldridge, are you all right?" "I'm fine, Diana. Better than fine." I shook my head, still laughing. She really couldn't help herself, could she? Even at the end. Apparently not. "Thank you for reading it. I appreciate you letting me know." I hung up and sat in my kitchen. Not the old kitchen, the one I'd shared with Michael, but the new one, in the cottage by the water where I'd moved after selling the house, and thought about Eleanor's final words. She'd been wrong about everything. Wrong about me, wrong about Michael, wrong about what family meant. She'd spent her entire life trying to control things that couldn't be controlled, and in the end, she died alone, bitter, Having lost everything that actually mattered, I, on the other hand, had my children, my grandchildren. Jennifer had given birth to a baby girl 6 months ago, a beautiful child named Michelle, after Michael. I had my home, my pension, my memories of 36 years with a man who'd loved me, despite his mother's best efforts to destroy us. I had won. Not because Eleanor lost, but because I'd built something she never could. A family that actually loved each other. It's been 3 years since Eleanor died. I'm sitting on the deck of my cottage in Old Saybrook, watching the Long Island Sound turn gold in the evening light. There's a glass of wine on the table beside me, the same vintage Michael and I used to share on our anniversary, and a baby monitor glowing green in case little Michelle wakes up from her nap. Jennifer and her husband are inside, making dinner. Robert's coming tomorrow with his girlfriend, a lovely woman named Priya, who makes him laugh in ways I haven't heard since he was a boy. Grace is joining us for the weekend, bringing her famous apple pie and her even more famous ability to make me smile when I'm feeling maudlin. This is my life now. Quiet. Full. Nothing like what I imagined when I was 29 and falling in love with a handsome man at a bar in Back Bay. But good. Genuinely good. People ask me sometimes if I regret how things ended with Eleanor. They phrase it carefully. Do you ever wish you'd handled it differently? But what they're really asking is whether I feel guilty, whether the weight of sending an 89-year-old woman to prison keeps me up at night. The honest answer is no. I don't regret protecting my husband. I don't regret documenting Eleanor's crimes. I don't regret standing in that conference room with my manila envelope full of evidence and watching her world collapse around her. What I regret is that it was necessary at all. I regret that Eleanor couldn't love her son without trying to control him. I regret that she saw me as an enemy instead of a partner in making Michael happy. I regret the 36 years of Cold War, the cutting remarks, the constant undermining that exhausted my husband and poisoned what should have been joyful family gatherings. I regret that Michael spent his final weeks being manipulated by the mother he loved, instead of being at peace with the family who loved him back. But those regrets aren't about my choices. They're about hers. Eleanor made her decisions. Every midnight visit to Michael's bedside. Every forged signature. Every whispered manipulation while my husband was too drugged to resist. She chose that path, step by step, document by document. And when she got caught, she chose to double down, accusing me of murder, threatening me with her family resources, fighting until the very end. I didn't make her do any of that. I just made sure there were consequences. That's something I've thought about a lot since Michael died. Consequences. We spend so much of our lives avoiding them, smoothing things over, keeping the peace, letting things slide because confrontation is uncomfortable. I did it for 36 years with Eleanor, smiled through her insults, ignored her snubs, told myself that keeping the family together was more important than my own dignity. And where did it get me? A mother-in-law who thought she could steal my husband's legacy while he was dying because she'd never faced a consequence in her life. She forgot what I do for a living. I keep records. That's what I'd tell anyone facing what I faced. Keep records. Document everything. Don't let your emotions drive you to confront someone before you're ready. Build your case like you're going to trial because you might end up there. And when the moment comes, when you finally have everything you need, don't hesitate. Don't second-guess yourself. Don't let guilt or fear or the opinions of people who don't understand make you back down. Because some people will never stop taking from you until you make them stop. And the only way to make them stop is to be ready when they finally go too far. I was ready. I'd been getting ready for years, even before I knew what Eleanor would try. 5 years before Michael died, I made that copy of the will and locked it in a safe deposit box. 5 years. Because I knew Eleanor. Because I'd watched her manipulate her own husband's estate after he died. Because I understood, on some level, that a woman like that would eventually come for what was mine. Paranoid? Maybe. But paranoia is just pattern recognition when you're dealing with someone who's shown you exactly who they are. 36 years of silence. 3 weeks of recordings. 1 satisfying ending. That's the math of it. 36 years of enduring Eleanor's cruelty, keeping my head down, protecting my marriage the only way I knew how. 3 weeks of documenting her crimes, building a case while my husband died inches away from me. And one afternoon in a lawyer's conference room, when everything finally came together. I think about that afternoon sometimes. The look on Eleanor's face when I pulled out the recordings. The way her voice cracked when she realized she'd been caught. The moment she understood, really understood, that she'd underestimated me for the last time. I won't pretend I didn't enjoy it. I did. After 36 years of being dismissed as the working-class girl who wasn't good enough for the Aldridge family, I earned that moment of satisfaction. But the satisfaction faded. What remains is something quieter, deeper. The knowledge that I protected my family. That Michael's legacy went where he intended it to go. That our children and grandchildren are secure because I was willing to do what was hard. Jennifer comes out onto the deck, little Michelle on her hip. The baby reaches for me with chubby fingers, and I take her, settling her into my lap. She has Michael's eyes. That same warm brown, that same spark of mischief. "Grandma," Jennifer says, sitting in the chair beside me. "You're looking thoughtful. Just remembering. Dad? Always." I kiss Michelle's soft hair. "But happy memories, mostly. The good years. Before the end." Jennifer nods. She understands. We all do now. The grief has softened into something more manageable. Not gone, never gone, but woven into the fabric of our lives in a way we can carry. "Dinner's almost ready," she says. "Robert just texted. He and Priya are running late, but they'll be here by dessert." "That's fine. We have time." Time. That's the thing, isn't it? Eleanor spent her whole life trying to control time, to extend her influence, to outlast her enemies, to make sure her version of the Aldridge legacy survived. And in the end, time caught up with her anyway. Left her alone in a nursing facility, bitter and broken, while the family she'd tried to destroy gathered without her. I have time now. Time to watch my granddaughter grow. Time to see my children build their own lives. Time to sit on this deck and drink wine and remember the man I loved without the shadow of his mother hanging over every memory. That's the real victory. Not the trial. Not the conviction. Not Eleanor's death alone and unloved. The real victory is this moment, right here. My granddaughter in my arms, my daughter beside me. A house full of people who love each other. Eleanor never had this. For all her money, all her status, all her scheming. She never had a moment like this. And I do. Every single day. Thank you so much for staying with me through this entire story. I know it was a long one. Some battles take decades to win, and telling them takes time too. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had someone underestimate you, dismiss you, or try to take what was rightfully yours, I hope you know that your moment is coming. You just have to be ready when it arrives. If you haven't already, please subscribe to Echo Lens Stories. We share new true stories every single day. Stories about karma, about justice, about the quiet strength it takes to survive when the people who should love you try to destroy you instead. Hit that like button if this one stayed with you. And leave me a comment. I want to know, have you ever had to fight to protect your family? What did it take to win? If you want to support the channel, there's a thanks button below. Every little bit helps us keep telling these stories. And remember, some people will never stop taking until you make them stop. So keep records. Build your case. And when the moment comes, don't hesitate. I'll see you in the next one.